welcome. I leave the word to to Rez.
Yeah, well, I should maybe introduce myself because
Maybe that's a good start.
Yeah, I'm Rez. I edit things, I coach some unfortunate individuals, and I interview people about the Enneagram, and that's mostly what I do with my time in a work context. In my private time, I study the Enneagram a lot. Yeah.
And you wrote a book.
Oh yeah, I did. I wrote a self-help book. It was a few years ago now. Yeah.
That needs to be in there, I think.
It does. It's called My Own Guru. My Own Guru.
Yeah. Cool. I want a signed copy. Have signed copy, please. So I'm Cici. I am. I'm in my work time. I'm translating books. I'm giving courses on the Enneagram. I'm writing books. I'm thinking about the Enneagram, and I'm doing a lot of inner work stuff and moving in those circles. And I've been conducting inner work courses for the last just over 15 years, I think it is now, depending on which kind of courses you count. But so it's in the Enneagram teacher / interviewer / coach / therapist-ish capacities that we're here to do this. And I'll leave it to Rez again to tell everybody, us too, what this is.
Yeah, so we decided to make our first topic about orientations to time. And I suppose in the end, I was quite glad that I got to explore this in a bit more depth than I would have. Well, I wouldn't have otherwise bothered, maybe. As Cici knows, my attitude towards this part of the Enneagram, or this teaching, it's been a bit dismissive, and I think the word bullshit may have made an appearance on the when we initially started talking about whether we were going to do this. And then to clarify what I'm referring to, which teaching I'm referring to, it's the one popularized by Suzanne Stabile, whose podcast I used to enjoy when I first came to the Enneagram. And so it's her teaching specifically on the time orientations. And my beef with it is, and still is, that it was just as true when I thought I was a different type than it is now I think I'm in my correct type. Now, you can say that arguably, because we have all of the types in us, we have each of these time orientations to a degree, but for me, for a teaching to be useful as a discrimination tool, something that will help us to discriminate a pattern in our awareness, there has to be one pattern, so one of the types patterns that's just screamingly louder than the rest of them. And then for me, this teaching doesn't really do that. I can see all three of the time orientations in my experience. Is it useful for anything else? So that teaching specifically, is it useful for anything else? Yeah, after having thought about it, I think it is, but I want to wait to talk about that and bat the ball over to Cici. And I want to know specifically, because Cici, you did do a thorough study with Russ and Don way back when. What specifically did they teach about time orientations? To what extent was it emphasized in their teachings? And then, yeah, how is it for you as your type to receive that teaching?
Okay. My spontaneous response when you say how was that taught, or to what extent was it emphasized, and I'm like, it wasn't really. It's not something I recall as this will tell you, this is the deal breaker or anything like that. But they do. I don't even specifically remember them talking about it that much. But it is, at least in Wisdom of the Enneagram, I know they have a short bit about how they view orientation to time. And they're not viewing it from the Hornevian groups or the social styles or stances or whatever we prefer to call them. So they're viewing it from the centers. And from the centers will not tell you, I mean, the whichever triad you belong in, which center you sort of live in at the Enneagram or on the Enneagram, will tell you what your outlook is, like what your where you're starting from and what you're going for, what you're looking for.
Mm.
So as a gut type, I would be starting from being here, thank you very much, and I would go for autonomy. Don't mess with me, I want to do it my way. And 8, 9s and 1s do that in very different ways, but they all do it. And so they would say that these types also share a common resistance to the present moment, because we want to do it our way, so it makes sense to me. For the heart types, that would mean I'm heart type, I would be to a large extent building, or I would be coming from, to a large extent, my self-image, how I'm mirrored by others, that kind of thing is the image triad. And to even have a self-image, I have to be oriented to the past, because that's how I collected it. Everything that goes in my self-image is something from the past that's building onto this like idea of myself. So that to that extent they would mention that too. And for the head types, that would mean I'm a head type, I'm more focused on security. We talk about also these like central emotional elements, if you will, which would be anger for the gut triad and shame for the heart triad, and this would be fear for the head triad. And to even consider being afraid of anything, I need to future, unless I'm talking about another kind of fear, like instinctual fear, something is coming towards me and I'm, ugh, but that's something else. That's not what the head types are about. The head types fear would be about worry and anxiety and anticipation of something that I might not enjoy. So for this reason, that's where their sort of teaching of orientation to time comes in, and it's not something you're ever encouraged to do. You know, if you're past oriented, you got to be a heart type. That's, I've never heard anyone say that, because that would be ridiculous. So it's not so much a characteristic as it is. It's not so much a characteristic of a person, that it is a characteristic of the theme of a group of types, which if I understand it, if I use it to understand this theme and these types, then it makes sense to me. But I cannot use it to understand my person and how I'm relating to stuff. Because the thing is, and I don't know if you're happy there, if I should go on with the
no, go on.
Yeah, but because the thing is, when you talk about the other variety, the Susan sort of variety with Hornevian groups or stances as the groups defining your orientation, we need to just backtrack a bit and see, okay, this is about what's commonly called social styles. It's just sort of execution mode, or, you know, how are we going to go about getting this? If I want safety, whatever that looks like to me, if I'm a 7, safety can look different from that of a 5 or a 2 or whatever. But if I prioritize safety, how will I do that? That's what the social styles will tell you. 7s will go about it because what they're afraid of is the inner, like pain or grief or stuff like that. So I'll go about it just grabbing onto whatever will keep me occupied or stimulated. Whereas the 5 will withdraw to do that, to keep, because I'm not afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. The world and all its unpredictable thing happening, and everything is going on, and so we do it differently. and the social style or Hornevian group is going to tell us how I go about my sort of center triad given focus, let's say. And I have a lot.
Yeah, do you want to? Yeah, I'll give you a break there. So do you want a break, or do you want to go more?
I don't know if you were going anywhere, that's why I'm stopping.
I just wanted to make sure that what you just said was just clear in that so we've got Russ and Don basing their time orientations around your home-based center. So and then you've got what they called, I always forget their names, Hurley and Donson, who took their discoveries around the centers, and there were a few discoveries actually that they were the ones to put the centers in an order and say that each type repressed a center. But their teaching on time orientations, or how they used it, was to map or layer on the centers with the social styles that Cece just discussed, and then that's the origin point of their time orientations teachings. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and the thing for me, it often goes back, these discussions go back to the need to unpack the term social style, because when we talk about how we're social beings and how we're relating to one another, how we're engaging in others, that's what we normally would say is the social style. And that would mean that what this teaching will say is that the 8, 7, and 3 would be future oriented, the 1, 2, and 6 would be present oriented, and the 4, 5, and 9 would be past oriented. And if we take social style to mean how I engage with others, how I approach life, then that is one thing. And it's another thing if I also, in my social style concept, include what happens within me prior to this relating, prior to my engaging. What is it that goes on? And when I look at these types through that filter, it's like it's interesting, because if we look at if we talk to 4s, 7s, and 1s about these different time orientation perspectives, they will all say, yeah, this sounds reasonable, because there is the same orientation, whichever teaching you look to. But if we look in the Hornevian order, so to speak, we look at the 8s and we say, what does the 8 want? The 8 wants autonomy. I want it my way. I want to assert myself by throwing my weight about, because I resist the present. And so I want to get my way, and that I look to the future to do that. I want to get there because I'm not happy here. So that makes sense. And I look at the 3 and I see a 3, I would want attention, I would want validation, and I would assert myself by collecting accolades to get noticed, which is going to happen in the future. So again, I'm sort of collecting these things to throw into my self-image basket that I'm carrying on my back, so to speak, which also makes sense. And for the 7, I'm like wanting security. So I assert myself by actively steering away from things that will be very uncomfortable to me, and to anticipate what's going to happen next, which is literally this definition of future orientation. So all these types, there's not much problem with those. They match as far as I can tell, as long as we remember that one is looking at where I come from and the other one is looking at where I want to go, which also is the definition of where I come from is now and where I want to go is future. So that's not a really problematic triad for me. But then I get to the past oriented types, so-called. And now the 4, the 5, and the 9. And as far as the 4, again, I can see how the 4 is often past oriented. I can see it practically with 4s that I'm interacting with and speaking to and having sessions with, that it's a lot about what happened and why it happened and what might have happened instead. And it's a lot of thinking from the perspective towards the past. But then I come to the 5, and most 5s I know are not going to say, oh, I'm very past oriented. I think about stuff that's happened. A lot of 5s that I know will say, I'm thinking about how to solve this problem and how to make sense of this bigger picture or whatever. And to me, that doesn't seem very past oriented. And then we come to the 9, and I'd say 9s, if I'm like making caricatures of the types, 9s have sometimes a hard time remembering what they had for breakfast. So it's not, I really don't see 9s as a, like by definition, past oriented kind of creature. But what I can see with 9s is I get my autonomy. I do that by withdrawing into this inner sanctum. And that can be, often it can be the future, but often it's not even the future. It's another future. It's a parallel timeline that doesn't exist. But I'm popping into this timeline to escape this one. That's what 9s do from what I can tell. And that I would not call that past oriented. So this has me scratching my head a bit, or it used to when I first came across this teaching, which was quite long ago. But then I can see that all of these types, no matter which teaching on this group you read, you'll hear that they're withdrawn types. They all withdraw to get a handle of things, to respond to the world. If you sort of come at a withdrawn type with something and said, do you want to do this? Or what do you think about this? Their reaction, not necessarily physically, but not pretty often physically too, will be to take a step back, to say, okay, let me think about this. And that can happen like this, or it can be something I want to make up my mind. I'll let you know Thursday. So it's, you know, and the practice of taking this question, saying, I'll get back to you, and then go sit somewhere, and they don't do this literally, obviously, for most of the time, but this is what happens. Then I process what just happened, which is the past, to make sense of that and to respond to it. And in that sense, I can see how all these 3 are going to be past oriented, but it's not like they're past oriented on this life timeline, but they're past oriented in the sense that they're like going back to that to process it. And I can process things that happened 10 years ago, or I can process things that just happened, because I want to make sure I'm coming back with the right response. And that sort of goes for all these 3 types in various ways. So in that way, I can see when I take social style to mean not just how I come across, but also, or perhaps especially, what happens within to engage in this social interaction, then it makes sense for me to see them as past oriented. And then the now oriented, or the present oriented, with Hornevian group with 1s, 2s, and 6s, that was really also a head scratcher for quite, for a good while, because if I'm a 1, I want to have my autonomy, and when I have my autonomy, I'm going to have it through doing everything right, so I can get a break from my superego and actually have some time off. That's sort of the dream of the 1, not necessarily happening, because there's always the next thing, but that's sort of the MO of the 1. So I try to bring that freedom about by addressing any imperfections in the present, sure, but it's also to improve things. And improvement, just like fear, it is going to require a future, because if there's no future, there's no improvement. I mean, I want to get somewhere. So, okay. And I look at the 2, and the 2 wants this attention and this mirroring. And how am I going to get that? I'm going to get that by addressing needs in the present, but also those will require a future to be satisfied. And I might even plan to help somebody, tomorrow. I say, I'll come out shopping with you. And so it's also not very clear cut. And then the 6s, they want security and sort of never failing alliances. And to bring that about, I'm adhering to the codes of the group. And at first blush, to me, these 3 is like, how are they now oriented? How are they present oriented? But then I realized that they all quite clearly consult their superegos. That's their way of doing this. How am I going to relate? How am I going to social style? And I'm going to do it by first checking in with my superego. So the one is checking in with a superego to see what is the right thing to do. The two is checking in, how am I being loving right now? Or how could I be needed right now? What was the right thing to do again? And the 6, same thing. How am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get there? What's required of me here? And the superego, the checking with the superego is a very now thing. I can't check with the superego yesterday. I have to do it right now. And the superego will say, you know, the whole point of the superego, of course, this is material from the past. That's how the superego gets born. But the superego doesn't say that. It says, this is how it's always been, and this is the truth. That's sort of the superego way, right? So it's going to be a present moment checking in to see that this happens the way it should. And in that way, again, all these duty types that Don and Russ would have called them are going to be present oriented. So in these ways, I can see how this teaching fits, but not as in a way of saying, if you're type X, you do this. Because to me, I can't think of a 9 who, maybe there is a 9, but I can't think of one who would hear this and say, oh, I'm so past oriented. This is my big problem. It's like, no, it's not. I've never met one. So again, it's a matter of describing. It's a good description, but not of the person, but it's a good description for an aspect of the type. But we need to agree on what aspect it is that we're describing. And I think that's what often happens in these contexts, that we love these teachings that we can map out in a meme and share and have like a list of things. This is for them, this is for those, this for those types, and we have like this little rule book with words. And they very rarely mean what we want them to mean, because they're very rarely actually made to fit every person of that type. They're made to collectively create a description of the type, which is different from the description of the person. So that's how I would
frame it. Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
Do those patterns not sound more like an aspect or a manifestation of the type's pattern, passion and fixation, rather than an orientation to time? Because when I read them and when I listen to them, that's what I think those are.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think, personally, I don't think orientation to time is a very good way of describe, as you said, as a discerning feature, as a how can I check whether this is my home base or not? Then I'm not saying, oh, go check orientation to time, that'll tell you, because if you're new at this, that will confuse you, I think.
Yeah.
And it really needs to be unpacked quite a bit. Most of these things do. Yeah.
I also want to go after Russ and Don's theory a little bit, because yeah, that's the self-image, whether a self-image is determined by the past, I mean, that of itself is interesting to think about. From one perspective, you know, I'm obsessed with Almas at the moment. My ongoing obsession with Almas tells me, or leads me to see self-image as being about loss of connection from essence, or an aspect of essence, and you know, that as a more sort of accurate description of what's causing us to push a self-image, which of course changes through the levels as well. I think you remember those words that Don Rizzo used to describe what self-image we're identified with at each level.
Do
you remember those?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember the exact.
Yeah. So my point is, it's not a fixed thing, is it? I think self-image is very much, it changes, and also I'm not sure it's sort of past derived. I'm not sure if it doesn't feel true to me to describe it that way. But the other thing about Russ and Don using, well, or the idea that these time orientations come as a result of being a member of either the head center, heart center, or body center, is I think there are better ways to describe the qualities of an awake head or an asleep head, heart, and body center. And those are available now. And I think it's Russ that's given those a lot more language and discernment. He's, by naming the qualities of an awake and an asleep center. What do you think of that, Susie? I mean, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you, and that's what that's why I said I can't remember this being a deal, because this is just one aspect of framing what a center would be about. It's just one thing, and but I have a question about your image thing.
Yeah,
you said I can't be sure that self-image is derived from future. Sorry, from
the past.
Yeah. Where would you derive it from?
Well,
how would you know? How does your ego know who you are, or believe it knows?
How do you know who you are? Yeah.
I mean, from the ego perspective, not from the essence perspective, but from the everyday, like, ego, garden variety person. How do you know who you are? If you didn't have a past, would you know?
Yeah, I think so.
How would you introduce yourself if you woke up right now with no memory of what happened?
Yeah.
Hey.
Well, that's impossible to answer. But what I tend to say when I'm introducing myself is depends on very much who I'm introducing myself to. But
yeah. And the thing is also, we call it self-image, as in we have one, which is not the case. I think we have like multiple self-images, but they are centered around a core. And contrary to what you just said, I don't think that core changes very much. I think that core is quite, and it's still talking in the ego sense, not in the essence sense, but that even within the ego, the core is going to be quite consistent. I mean, if you've been told for most of your childhood that you are this and that, that's going to be pretty hard to wash off, whatever you integrated at an early stage, because that's what the ego does. It latches onto it, because it's better to have a definition than not, even if the definition is bad. Yeah, from the ego's point of view. And that's why I can absolutely agree that the self-image is going to be, or my various self-images on this little scale that I have, they're all going to be derived from what I did, what I know, what I was told, what happened. I cannot derive a self-image from thin air, or from I can't see how that would work. And not that that's really important right now, just
it's not
to address it. To me, it's quite clear that self-image is
a past space
from the past, and but that doesn't mean I'm past. That doesn't mean I'm sort of stuck in the past. I mean, everybody has a self-image. This is not 3 and 4, and this also, this is the point. It's not describing the types. It's a description of the centers, and we all have a heart center. We all have a self-image, regardless of which type we belong to. So that would again be, for me, why it doesn't hold up really to have this as a hard feature of a specific type.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page with this then, aren't we? It's interesting to engage with this theory and to try it on, and to explore its truth. So, and for 6 of 9 of the types, the theory goes in 2 different ways. So to try on both of those. And then for 3 of the types, it's 1, 4, 7, isn't it, Cece? It's just, yeah, it's the 2 teachings or the 2 perspectives are in alignment. Yeah.
And the thing is, this again, what you just said is only the perspective of somebody looking at this. Oh, these say this about the orientation to time, which is again with Don and Russ, I think slightly an overinterpretation, because they don't really say it's an orientation. They just use it as an aspect of the sentence. So, and then read the other one and say, oh, these don't match. It doesn't add up. And I'm like, well, it does. They just say different things about these things, and it's just not being unpacked enough. It's being smacked together in a nice, graph, and then used to show knowledge somehow. So I think a lot of misunderstandings happen because people don't bother to learn what they're learning about. We love to learn stuff, but then we learn this for 9, 1, 2, 3, 7, and we don't know what it is about them that we're learning. And that just turns into soup. Ennea soup is rife on the internet right now.
I think I understand what you're saying is that they're not paradoxical. They're different perspectives on the same phenomena, and I completely agree with you. They're not. It's not. Is that what you're saying, Cece? I don't want to.
In a way, and that's my understanding. That's what I can do with this. But if I listen, I found a blog. I just went, Googling, and I found a blog where somebody told their readers about the orientation to time as per the Hornivian types, and described that 5s are past oriented because they're analyzing what's already happened, and I was like, I don't agree with that. And I saw I think that was Susan herself, tweets about how problems in relationships or conflict will arise because you're focusing in different directions time-wise, and if you if you clock onto this, then you will be able to not have some of those conflicts. And I was like, it's not true for me. It's not true if I look at my relationship. It's not true in the sense that this is what the types are doing. That doesn't quite make sense to me, but it does make sense how anyone, and I didn't get hold of the Hurley-Johnson version. I tried. Can't remember if it's Johnson or Dobson, because it was one and then changed. So he changed into N. Is that it?
I think it did, yeah. Okay. Why on earth? I have no idea. Do you?
No, it's one letter. I don't know either. But anyway, Catherine Hurley, let's say that. I didn't get my hands on that book, and that would have been interesting because I did read about it, but I can't recall this. Again, I can't recall this being a thing. I can recall this dominant and non, neglected centers being a thing. But this is not something I know that they used as a type defining feature. So I'm not sure, but to me, it does not work as a type defining feature. And again, if you do inner work and you stumble across this theory and it makes sense to you, by all means, use it. Use whatever makes sense to you, but don't use it to like ascertain type. If you're unsure, I'm not saying I don't think this is a good tool. It's not among the top 5 that you would like be looking at.
No. Instincts, as you're the instincts queen, and I think you are. I just think there's no one better that teaches the instincts that I've come across anyway. But do you think there's any? Do you think there's any instinct? Do you think there's any way in which our dominant instinct impacts how we orient to time?
In the sense that it would give us a primary orientation No,
Yeah.
no, I don't. Well, no, I don't think that would be. I mean, you can see if I'm just thinking self-preservation, it's about now and it's about tomorrow. It's not so much about yesterday because you're at where you're at. But then again, none of them are much about yesterday, unless possibly social, because you have like relationships, and again,
Yeah.
also a sort of self-image. It's a relationship image. You have contracts, unspoken contracts with people, and they require some past. And so there are aspects of this, but there is nothing. I would never go so far as to say, if you lead with instinct, this is going to affect your type this way, time orientation wise. I would not do that. Because I think there are many other parameters floating around.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And also, when I was thinking about this, I did think about how, as a self-preservation type, how a lot of my attention is going to what I need to do, what I'm about to do, planning. There's quite a strong future orientation, actually.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And that would be in relation to this SP stuff.
Yes.
It's not like your thing. It's related to this. And then you think about your parents, and I bet that you're gonna go back in time and have some beef to chew on.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, so it's like we do it when we need it. I mean, we use these different orientations to get about, as just like we use the instincts to get about in life. If I'm social blind, I'm still going to use my social instinct. It's not going to be absent.
Yeah.
But that's possibly another live.
Another one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should wrap up and see if our attendee has anything she wants to ask, but no pressure, Laurie, if you haven't really.
Yeah, thanks for this. I was a little surprised because I thought this was going to be a huge webinar, but
we had, I think, almost 30 registrants, but I think they're counting on the
recording
questions, and they'll do the recording.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions, but I've just enjoyed this because I've seen this concept in like Riso and Hudson's book, and I didn't really understand what it means. So thanks for the explanation.
You're very welcome. Will you mind that we put this up as a recording?
Oh, it's fine.
Good.
Yeah, what else? Well, maybe we should talk about what we're going to be doing in the next one.
Yeah, since this is, we're almost gone in there, we've dipped our toes in it. So you
like
I don't know, I can do it.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
It's like we're going to be discussing next time, which is going to be every second Monday of the month at 2 o'clock Central European time, or summertime as it happens, up to October. Next time we're going to be looking at more of this Hornevian social style thing, actually, and see, because when you talk about the Hornevian groups, or these groups, depending whichever language you use for them, there are going to be some people who say, oh, I don't think they're very good descriptors. I think it varies too much. I can totally see an assertive 6, especially a counterphobic 6. I can totally see an assertive 1. I can see how 4s can be quite assertive when they don't, get their will like the rest of us. And, so I can see a lot of people being assertive that are not 7s or 8s or 3s. And also I can see 7s are not always that assertive. They can be quite compliant and sort of want to cater to their environment and so on and so forth. So people have thought, well, they're sort of dissing the Hornevian groups a bit because they don't see the relevance, and they see too many exceptions, and reckon that if there's too many exceptions, that won't be useful. And I have a take on that too, and you have a take on that. So we're going to be tackling these social styles next month and see what is it, again, what is it that's being described and what is not necessarily being described. And so how can we reconcile these seeming differences?
Yeah, maybe that's
Are
us.
we done?
I think so. Yeah, I think we've said all that we can. I've said all that I can for sure about time.
But I can, but that would take a while.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do that. I'll also say that if you're on Facebook, it's likely that you know that there is this group called EnneaGrammar for Ennea Growth, and it's grammar with an A. And I'm hosting that group. Res is co-moderating. Please join the group if you haven't, if you're interested in using the Enneagram for actual inner growth and apply it to your inner work using what works of it. And yeah, especially of the really the basic, the kind of things that we're going to be looking at in these sessions, because they're very important and they're sort of often a bit swept over, or because they're basic, but they're not that basic after all. So that's why they're interesting.
Cool. This has been good. Not
Yeah,
bad for our first. We did okay for our first one, hey?
we did.
We didn't plan as per, I like to plan, but we didn't plan.
No, we're very mature. We just, you know, met the moment with full awareness. Anyway, so I hope to see you. I know I'll see Raz, and hope to see some other people listening to the recording next month.